my dear friends and colleagues Will Rand and Grace M. Alexander for their piece Firebirth. They're going to take a moment to speak to their piece before they give a performance, and then there's going to be some time for reflection and Q&A afterwards with Will, Grace, Michelle, who you may have seen at the Wildfire Roundtable, and then myself. So let's welcome Will and Grace out.
It is such a joy to be with all of you. Thank you so much for being a part of creating this beautiful space to honor and remember and create art about fire, about a force that is so destructive and yet brings people together and can bring people together in such a special way. We want to share just very briefly about the piece that we're about to perform. Firebirth was created to be a piece that was responsive and is responsive to our changing climate. To create spaces just like these where people can come together to really consider what does it mean to relate to the natural world as it changes.
Hello everyone, thank you for being here. My name is Grace. I am a collaborative partner with Will. I'm originally from Santa Monica, California, so this is amazing to be home and playing for a bit of a home crowd. I also grew up in Plains, Montana. These two places are ridden with wildfires. They're ridden with natural disasters. All of the North American West is a place where we are taught from a very young age to be very considerate of things like water usage, how you have a brush fire, going camping, all these things. So this piece, we sort of came up with it together, the concept. In 2023, there was a very large fire, about 18,000 acres, that came very close to my family's land, where they work in forest conservation. So fire is a very prevalent thing in my life for my family. This fire came incredibly close to our family land. We had to evacuate. I was not here for the LA fires, but I, like one of our panelists today, talked about how viewing the fires through the media was really scary. You know, you're seeing your friends' homes burn down, places you grew up burn down. It was very emotional to hear the panelists today, so thank you, all the panelists, for sharing your stories. And this piece is definitely a culmination of the life cycle of fire, how fire can be equally destructive, and also serve as a common unifying force for communities all around the western parts of, western parts of Northern America, and it's serving to be the entire world. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you to Elmi and Michelle and Holly for organizing this and being such amazing collaborators through this process. We are so grateful to be a part of this today. Thank you.
Hello?
Hello, check.
Hello? Okay, I think we're on now.
Thank you guys for staying so late for this concert.
Yes, thank you so much for staying late for this concert. If we may incentivize you to stay a little bit later, there is food afterwards. But we'd like for this kind of last portion here to just be a moment of reflection and thought about all of the events of today. We invite comments and ruminations from the audience, but I may start by inviting some of those from Grace and Will, if you feel so inclined. I know that your experience working on and writing Firebirth is part of a larger song project. And I know that it's all related to your work and care for the environment and your backgrounds and experiences. So I would wonder to start maybe if you both would be willing to share a little bit more about how you saw Firebirth fitting into today.
Well, today, like I hope I've said over and over and over, has been tremendous in so many ways. Because I really believe that weaving as a humankind, our relationship with the natural world and the arts, the way we express ourselves, is something I feel really, really drawn to. And the work that we try to do with Earth Story and in creating this project, Firebirth, was to create space for this, was to try to find ways and amazing people to work with, to create spaces to remember, spaces to connect with one another, to hear our stories, to remember the times that were harrowing and terrifying, as so many of you experienced a year and a half ago. And feeling the gravity of that in a space where we can all be in one place, doing our human thing of making art, of being together, and remembering that the natural world knows things that we still have no earthly idea about, no pun intended. That the whole idea behind Firebirth, when Grace sort of approached me with this idea after the terrible fire near Plains, Montana, I started learning about fire ecology and about indigenous understanding of fire, which is very different from the understanding I grew up with, which was fire bad, fire dangerous, fire destroys, fire kills. I started to learn these different things about serotinous cones. Can you say that, 2 times forward and 2 times backward? Serotinous cones. Does anybody know what a serotinous cone is, by chance? Okay, ecology lesson. Serotinous cones fall in this part of the country only when fire occurs. For, I think it's lodgepole pines, but now that I'm on the spot, I can't remember. But they fall to the ground in flame and open only when there's burning fire around them. And that's the only way that species of tree reproduces. And so I started to learn things about how early succession plants that rebuild the soil, and plants that require fire to survive, know something a little bit more than I could ever imagine about fire. And so it made me wonder, how could we begin to reimagine our understanding of fire collectively with our natural neighbors? Understanding that there's a cycle, that the burning and the destruction is real, and it takes life and it literally deconstructs. And then on the other side, fireweed, the very last movement that you heard, where that little shoot just reaches up after the destruction. Fireweed literally travels in the atmosphere until it senses through electromagnetic pulse and understanding that there's a burn scar in the ground. And that's when it falls to the ground, and it roots, and it fixes nitrogen in the soil, and it creates the conditions for life to come back. And I wondered, how can we, in a place of recovery, be like fireweed, work with fireweed to be in a place of rebuilding the soil, literally from the ground up? So all that to say, events like today feel like a little bit of that regeneration after a place of destruction.
Yeah, Will said it great. Yeah, I'm so lucky to have artistic people in my life who also care about the environment. Like I said in my intro, my family has always sort of been surrounded by nature in one way or another, whether it's desert or forest or water. And those aspects of my life have just woven into me as a person. And I feel as though, as a musician, we spend a lot of time indoors. We spend a lot of time doing work, as a lot of people do. You know, you spend your time sitting in a chair, sitting at a desk, you know, looking at your computer, and not always connecting with nature in the way that you might want to. And it's been really important for me in my undergraduate education and my graduate education, and I'm about to move to another place, that nature has remained a constant, and caring for nature and incorporating natural aspects into my music making, into my artistry. I'm also a photographer, so taking pictures of nature, I mean, there's just so many aspects that you can weave nature into your daily life. And I think this piece is a part of a larger project called Resilient Sounds, which is my commission project that I'm doing with 5 different composers who are writing works for violin and blank, whether it's violin and piano, 2 violins, solo violin, violin and electronics, 2 violins and piano. So all new works for violin, but focused around natural disaster. So how these natural disasters can break down communities and natural aspects of the world, but also bring people together in ways that you wouldn't expect. I mean, definitely my experience with the fire in Plains, Montana, I mean, it was a very small town, nothing like Los Angeles, but it's 2,000 people. Everyone pretty much knows each other. My dad, who's here tonight, is on the volunteer fire department, and he got a call on his phone saying, you know, there's a fire, you know, down the road from our house. And I was in the midst of packing up my life to move to Vancouver, British Columbia. So it was a really jarring experience, but going through that experience of, okay, it's time to pack up the house because you're moving, but also pack up all the things you might love and care about, because the house might be burned down in a day because the fire's moving so fast, because the wind's so powerful. You know, and that was just such a crazy few days. And I can only imagine, like in Los Angeles, what I heard today from the panel, what I've heard from so many of my friends who lost their homes. I mean, just an absolute fury. And this community of Plains, Montana that's so small, they really came together. I mean, you saw churches, you saw food banks, you saw people popping up out of the woodwork to just support each other. And I feel that so much. Like, I think community really is our saving force in this life, and having people to be with and care about the environment together is so important. And I really, really believe that, you know, music and art, even though it seems like sometimes when I'm practicing my scales, I'm like, man, I could be out in the woods. I could be out, you know, I could be on a hike. I could be swimming in the lake. And, or, you know, like planting trees. My mom and dad, like when they met, they planted trees, and they planted hundreds of trees, and now those trees are twice the size of me when I was born. So those kinds of things that you can see and you can feel and you can touch, like always reminding yourself that nature is there for you, and yes, it goes through cycles of turmoil, but yes, it's always going to be a grounding source for everyone, because we all are on this planet together. We're all, you know, grounded by this earth and by the nature. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Will and Grace. I think that gives a really beautiful picture of the work that you've been doing, and I'm certain are going to continue to do. So with that in mind, I wonder if we may be able to invite the audience, if you have questions or if you have reflections based on the day that we've experienced together.
Thank you all for all of your work. It was just absolutely splendid to be a part of this event today. I would say one constant in witnessing, listening to all the music going on here tonight, one constant has been, how do we depict disaster? How do we depict it musically? What do we use? Do we use imagery? Do we use gesture? Do we use timbre? What do we use? And I wanted to ask first, Emmy and Michelle, do you think that particular quandary, like translating disaster into music, was kind of a part of how you formulated this idea? Same to you, Will and Grace. Did you find any challenges with depicting this disaster musically? So kind of a dual question, one for the style of the two organizers, one for the style of the wonderful musicians.
I mean, I will say that I think a lot about place and environment and how that impacts sound. Like some of my work has looked at the way just like the life in a particular city finds its way into the music of a particular artist. And so I think just after the fires last year, I just spent so much time thinking about like, wow, LA is going to be totally different after this. It's totally transformed. Like it's never going to be the same again. And while that's partially true, it also kind of isn't, right? Like LA goes through these cycles. I became very fascinated with the idea of like disaster in LA, earthquakes, floods. Like we kind of go through a whole range of them here. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this is just for me, it's just very fun to ask people like, well, how do you hear a place? And how do you hear a place in the context of disaster? Like, how does that change the way you think about it? So that was sort of my, I guess, guiding approach to all of this, especially with the roundtable.
Yeah, and I think I might just add to that. Michelle and I both spoke very deeply about how much we wanted this to feel like a community event where we were able to engage with so many different types of people who are thinking about this event in LA's history or in their own lives in different ways. And so I would say, I don't think it's been entirely indicated, but Grace, Will, and I all went to our undergrad together. And so I've been fortunate enough to have known them for more years than I think I'd like to admit at this point, because it feels scary. But, to see their piece and then to see the work that Michelle's been doing, particularly with the LA fires, and try to come up with a way that we can all come together to have these sorts of reflections together.
I'd just say one quick thing piece-wise, it's just when creating art, it's always the question of intention, what's the purpose? And beneath anything you create, what's the why? What's the purpose? And then how does the art support that all the way through? How does the event support that all the way through? And so when dealing with something like disaster, it's almost asking the questions of beneath that. It's not just a disaster, but what really happened here and what is continuing to happen and what's coming out of it and how to accompany that rather than really anything else. Just be with it. Yeah.
And I think on a quick interpretation note, I feel like finding different sounds on the instrument, Will and I definitely went back and forth. Will lives in Seattle, I live in Vancouver right now, so we're close, but we're not super close, so we'll call often and talk about decisions, musically or otherwise, and how to depict fire, dryness, lush, fields that are then crisp to burn. So I mean, we were talking about different ways to make that happen on the instrument, technically, and then also how to really match the two instruments together to create more of a feeling than just individual instruments making a sound.
Shall we transition here? I think we shall transition.
All right. Well, we'd love to continue having these conversations with you over in the music library, where there will be plenty of snacks to support those conversations. And we'll also have the gallery reopened if you didn't get a chance to look at them already.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. This is great.
Thank you.